Welcome back to All In Always. One of the reasons I started this podcast was because I wanted to tell stories about people who dedicate their lives to serving others. For the first 5 episodes, you've heard a lot about my Navy career, but service doesn't only happen in military uniforms. Today, we're talking about a profession that almost everyone depends on at some point, but very few people actually understand. When something terrible happens, the first responder you meet usually isn't a police officer. It isn't a firefighter or an EMT. It's a voice. That voice belongs to a 911 dispatcher. Today's guest is my cousin who spent years working as a dispatcher for DUCOM in DuPage County, Illinois. We're going to talk about what really happens after someone dials 911. Welcome to All In Always, the podcast where service, sacrifice, and leadership are more than stories. They're a way of life. I'm Chris Garcia, and every episode, we take a look behind the uniform to share the experiences, lessons, and moments that shaped a lifetime of service. Whether you're a veteran, first responder, currently serving, a family member, or someone who simply wants to better understand this life, I'm glad you're here. If these conversations mean something to you, follow the podcast, subscribe on YouTube, and share this episode with somebody who would appreciate hearing it. Now, let's get into today's story. All right, so we're going to take it slow and easy. We're going to start off with some softballs and maybe I'll throw you some curves. How's that feel?
First, I loved your intro. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I try to refine it over time and, it's getting better. All right, so I guess the first question, and it's the most obvious question, right, is how does somebody get into becoming a dispatcher? Like what's going through your mind when that idea pops into your head? Kind of walk me through how this came to be for you.
I absolutely fell into it. It wasn't anything I ever aspired to do. I was looking for a new job. One of my girlfriends had interviewed there, but then got hired as a police officer somewhere else before she started. And she said, I was listening to my dispatchers on the radio and I thought, you could do this. And she didn't remember the name of the place, but she remembered kind of where it was. And I just drove around the area. I found it one day and I went in, asked if they were hiring, and they were. And after a short testing process, like short, because it was a million years ago, I was hired. And that really was it. I had never aspired to do it, but I can't imagine having done anything else.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned not aspiring to do it prior to. I can't imagine that that's like the first thing on your list of career choices,
Yeah.
as you're growing up, because 911 dispatching is behind the scenes, and believe it or not, considering how long the first responder organizations have been around, the dispatcher and 911 itself has only been around for a little bit more than 50 years. So that was amazing thing that I found out when I was doing my history of 911 podcast, which I found out quite a few things that I had no idea about. And
Hmm.
that's what I love doing these. And that's going to be the format. I'm going to, bring somebody on, but before I do, I'm going to do a little informational 15-minute run through about the history of that profession. So did you know what the job was actually going to be before you started? I mean, everybody's got a kind of an idea, right? We see it on the TV. We've probably read about it, but you kind of grew up with a circle of friends that were in the business already, right?
No, not really. I just had one girlfriend, the one that told me about where I ended up working. But all of my other friends, I mean, nobody at the time had like careers. I started there when I was 23. So we were all still kind of like, what am I going to do? But when I did finally get hired there, it was so much more and so much bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah, that's true. And I learned a lot about that during the research for the last podcast. Is it's an unbelievable amount of things that you are in charge of as far as multitasking. I had no
Mhm.
idea, and I know that viewers and people outside of that sort of thing just don't know what it takes and what
Yeah.
the job entails. So
It's a
yeah,
big
that's
misconception,
amazing,
because we've had several people say, "Oh, anybody could do it. Any officer's wife could do it," which honestly is an insult to the wives,
right?
because that to me says, "Oh, well, these people who aren't very smart could do it. Why can't you?" Like what a weird thing to say about somebody's wife.
Yeah, I'm surprised people talk that way sometimes.
Oh,
I just don't
absolutely they do.
like knee jerk reaction, but
Yeah,
I don't think that 911 dispatchers just get their due respect. You know,
thank you.
and I know that it's changing. I see a lot of stuff these days about trying to change the mindset that the 911 dispatcher is also a first responder. And of
Mhm.
course you are the first responder. You're the first person that that person calls on their worst day.
And that's what I tell people, like, the
Wow,
first thing
yeah.
that people think to do when something happens is just 911.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
So
automatically they think, it doesn't matter what it is. There must be a limit at someone's head, or maybe it's a culture that we have brought upon ourselves to understand that anything that's tragic or out of our control, that makes sense would be a quick call to 911, right? So going into it, I guess you were kind of blind, so to
mhm,
speak, right?
had
So,
no idea that I would be doing what I was doing. And I think too, when they call 911, they think they're talking to an officer,
mm,
and they're not. None of us are sworn police officers, at least not in my center. In
right.
other places it is the case, but none of us were sworn officers. And I think that's a big misconception people think. Like, well, why aren't you here yet? Well, because I'm in a council. I'm in a totally different city.
I I'm curious about that too, because I know, there was a time where, 911 wasn't being called, right? Before the inception
Mhm.
of the emergency call number, it was you would call your local fire department or the
Yeah.
hospital to dispatch an ambulance or the police department itself in order to get somebody to come, right?
Yeah. And in some places it is like that, just not here. And I don't think anywhere in Illinois.
So do you think that because like Ducom sounds like a contractor that provides that type of service. Is that right? Is that a good assumption or
You
are
know, I don't I never really understood if we were like a government agency or not, so I really can't speak to that, but I know that the departments do contract with the 911 center to, do all of their police, fire, and medical dispatch.
so the training, you said the initial process, right? I guess that you were tested, correct?
Right, but again, that was 30 years ago, so it is way different now. So when I got hired, I had to do a typing test. I went in for a short group testing, and then you were hired or not. But now the hiring process itself is like a 6-month process.
Good
It's the
grief.
same process that the police go through to get hired now, at least.
Well, I would assume so. And I mean,
Yeah.
and so you spent what? How many years were you with Ducom?
25.
And in those 25 years, how much evolving technology did you see come through the door to help you in your job?
Not as much as you would want. There definitely was technologies that we didn't have. So, I mean, we did see a lot change. Like when I started there, we still had like the tubes for the computer monitors, with
Wow.
the green letters on the black screen.
I've got pictures of those.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
We had headsets, but there were still people who were using actual um handheld, yeah,
Handsets?
thank you. That would plug into the computer.
Oh, that's interesting.
The radios changed. I mean, that probably changed the most out of anything was the radios over the years.
Oh, I'm sure. And I think I have a couple of technology type of questions later on. So we'll just put a pin in that. But
Mhm.
so I think what most people assume, like you were saying earlier, is there's just someone just answers a phone and sends help. And so we were saying that there's so much more to that. So we're about to get into that because we
Okay.
want to know what happens when somebody dials 911. And let's let's frame it in a way where we're talking about Steffi sitting behind the desk. You've been there maybe 6 months.
Mhm.
And well, actually, even before we get to that part, how long was it before you took your first call by yourself?
By myself, probably a couple months, but you start answering, at least I started answering calls right away, but I had a trainer who listened to every phone call with me and was sitting next to me to tell me, "All right, ask this, ask this." So,
Oh yeah, so a lot has changed. So we'll go back in time to the beginning, and then we'll talk about how things have changed because I know there's systems out there that have been updated and upgraded. So obviously the days of where you have this giant computer screen,
mhm.
like you said, with the green letters, like you're working a Commodore 64
Yes.
from way back when,
Mhm.
has significantly improved. But walk me through when somebody dials 911. Say like I call right now, I pick up the phone and it's 30 years ago, and Steffi answers the phone.
Well, the first thing I do at the time, we only said 911. Now it's, 911, where do you need assistance, police and fire, something like that.
Right.
And then the first thing that I want to know is, where are you calling from and what is your phone number? Because if I don't have those two things, I can't get you help
Right. And I mean, I'm sure there's instances where you get disconnected, right?
all the time.
And if you don't get vital information prior to that happening, number one, you don't know if you can get them back. And
Hmm.
secondly, if they haven't given you any idea where they're located, I wouldn't call it frustrating as much as I would. It's just concerning, right? And has that ever happened to you where you've
Oh,
gotten disconnected?
so many times. So many times, especially in the earlier days. I started there in 97, and cell phone technology wasn't what it is now. So if you called on a cell phone and we got disconnected, that was the end of it.
Wow.
Or if I didn't have the information I needed, I had no way to get you back because we didn't even know your phone number if you didn't give it to us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, especially with cell phones. Cell phones brought along a whole new problem, right?
Mhm.
And that engineers had to come up with a system to be able to understand that, hey, we got to utilize GPS, triangulation, cell phone towers, and all these things, right? So, yeah. So you received a phone call, you get the information that you need at a minimum. Hey, what's the nature of your emergency, where you're located? I need a callback number just in case, right?
Yeah, that really, those three things.
And then from there, how do you fire off that information to like the local emergency response? And how do you decide who you want to send?
Luckily, in the dispatch center that I worked in, the computer did a lot of that for me. I would be able to put in the location. We generate like a ticket for service, almost like if you called ComEd or something,
Right.
they would do that. That's what we basically do. So I would decide, what kind of call is this? Is it police or medical or fire? What city it goes for? And then again, thankfully, once I started there, we were on the computer, but the people, the generation before me, they wrote everything on little hand cards
Oh yeah.
and they would walk them around the room, like, hey, this is yours. And you had to take meticulous notes on these little tiny cards. And so when our system would go down, we would go back on those. And it was just always, I hated them.
It sounds like a nightmare. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's got to like destroy you inside though, if because we were talking about getting disconnected, and depending on what kind of call it was, and the severity and the
Hmm.
need, right, would determine uh what was going on in your mind when that disconnect was happening. We can talk about all that later, but I'm just
Hmm.
kind of going through the idea of like I couldn't imagine in a situation like that where time is of the essence and you're trying to get as much information as you can. You're multitasking. You got to you're pressing buttons, you're making calls, you're typing. And while all at the same time, you know, if somebody is on the phone, you haven't been disconnected yet, you have to keep them calm,
Mhm,
because calm is the only way you're going to get that information, right?
mhm. Yep. And they would always tell us that my tone dictates the tone of the call.
Mm.
So if you call and you're frantic, obviously you had to call 911. I can't freak out with you because if we're both freaking out, nobody's getting information,
I c
so
It's probably not a job for you if you're going to mirror the same emotion that the caller is having.
it
You're not gonna.
happens. You would hear operators and you're like, what is going on over there?
Oh my goodness, so people do get emotionally attached sometimes, yes?
You can't help it. Yeah. I mean,
It's
we've
just
all
it's a
kind
part
of,
of being human, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'll probably ask about in a little bit, but just the emotional impact. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's one of those jobs where you do have to detach as much as possible, but you can't be a robot either. They got to know there's a human being on the other end of the phone that's
absolutely.
actually truly there going to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. But I always said, try your hardest to make them just be voices on a phone. And you don't want to be cold, like you said, but at the same time, I can't get emotionally invested in every call. It would drive you crazy.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't even imagine. So what's happening behind the scenes while you're still talking to the caller?
Well, while I'm still talking to the caller, I have to give all that information, make sure that the operator who is dispatching that particular phone call has all the updated information they need, especially if it's something to do with like, hey, did you see that this person had a weapon or that this person left the scene or something like that? It's not enough for me to have the information. I have to make sure that that other operator has the information so that their officer can have the information. And then at the same time, I'm still working my own job. So I have officers in my cities who are still, I have to send them on calls while I'm on the phone. I have to take their traffic stops and run names and stuff like that while I'm still on the phone. There are some occasions where another operator will take over like your radio traffic.
It's just like monitoring situations that are in progress while you're actively involved in a call, right?
But the thing is you're actively involved in both. I
Really?
can't I can't be any less attentive to the officers on the radio because I'm on a phone call. I'm supposed to be on a phone call, but I'm also supposed to be monitoring everything going on my channel. So if I have, like a fight or something that I'm working on my channel and I pick up a 911 call and it's, traffic accident or it's something, big like an armed robbery, I'm handling both of these things at the same time. I'm not just monitoring, like you're actively working both of them.
Also, you said something about traffic stops and they send back information. What are you doing with that information that they're sending back to you?
So they give me their location and then usually the license plate of the car they're with. And then I make sure that the license plate is valid and that the driver is valid, that there's no warrants or anything like that. And if that's the case, it's very easy. But if it's not the case, then I have to make sure that they have that information, but also in a safe manner. So you want to make sure that they're not standing next to the person who's wanted when you tell them that person's wanted.
That's smart. Yeah, there's a lot more that, it's deeper than just giving information. You
Yeah.
have to you have to strategize what you're doing so you don't put the lives of the officers in danger.
And when it comes down to it, like that is my priority, is making sure that all the officers on my channel go home safe.
So I would ask a follow-up question on that, but I don't want I
Oh,
don't
go
want
ahead.
to dive into something a little bit too deep and get in the weeds on it. But I will say this, are there any callers that you struggled, like maybe there's a type of caller or maybe there's a specific caller that you had that you remember that made your job harder?
Hmm. The ones that like they know everyone. Well, I know your mayor. I know your director. I don't care. None of that. The mayor doesn't care.
Yeah. Or who are you? Right?
Right. I still need to know where you are, otherwise call the mayor.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to get the same quality of response and
Yes.
care regardless who you know, right?
And people absolutely think that because they earn a lot of money, that they're going to get better service. That's not the case. I have no idea who you are, what you make, and it doesn't matter, you
Yeah,
know?
we always forget that there's others out there that think that way.
Yeah.
We don't have those people in our circle, so we just kind of, oh my God, yeah, that I'm completely floored that somebody would think that they could get better service just because of what class of person they are or
Yes.
who they know. That's ludicrous to me.
And people would say frequently what they paid in taxes, their taxes pay my salary.
Yes, yes. I love it. That's comedy. I'm so glad that you bring stuff like that up because I just I think we believe it happens. I think we've actually probably seen movies and TV scenes where it depicts people like that you all have to deal with. But holy smokes, it's a real thing.
And it's infuriating when it did happen
God, I can't.
because you're almost offended. Like, that's not how any of this works.
So on the flip side of that, what would you if you were still in the business or and you were taking calls, what do you think that you would want to teach every person listening one thing about dialing 911? What do you think that would be?
Give us your location and give us your phone number. Like,
Just
really, that is the basics of it. Even if that's all we had, we can at least get you help. You have to
yeah,
know where you are and you have to know, or even if you don't know where you are, because I get that, we have to find out where you are.
right. I
Because
think that y'all some of them probably think y'all have superpowers and can figure out where they're at in an instant. We just locate me on the satellite.
yes, yes, get out your crystal ball, or they tell you the name of their subdivision. There might be 500 houses in that subdivision. So I had told people several times, if you were going to order pizza, what would you tell them? That's what I need to know.
There you go. Keep it simple.
Hmm.
I also, a devil's advocate, understand your position, but I also, and you know this better than I do, that people are engaged in those situations and that are having those moments, the worst moment in their life. They're not thinking that way,
Absolutely.
So you gotta kind of pull it out of them and stop them, get them to take a breath, and then, all right, tell me what you need, tell me where you are.
Hmm. And I mean, that really, I felt, was my biggest part of the job, is just, I'm going to be calm, you're going to be calm, we're going to figure it out. So the majority of the callers are absolutely fine. Everybody's calm, we get what we want, even when they are keyed up. So it really was the minority of people that would fight with us. Why is it taking so long? Just send them. Why don't you shut up?
You know what though? I feel how much more boring would it be if you didn't have those people making calls?
Oh, absolutely. Job security.
No doubt. So I know that in this job, there's probably calls that you just can't forget and probably want to. And maybe the ones also that you can't forget that you don't want to because they were just that good. They ended the way that everybody would hope
Mhm.
and it was like save the day type of scenario. But without violating anyone's privacy, are there any calls that stick with you to this day?
There
Just
was
like
one
one.
there's one funny call, and it's the one that I always tell people when they ask about calls. A person had called and they lived in one of the suburbs, and he said, "This is going to sound crazy, but there's a buffalo." And he gave me the name of the street. And it was, I mean, 1 or 2 in the morning. And to myself, I'm like, okay, it's a buffalo. Because we're in Illinois. There are typically not buffaloes. And I asked the guy, "Are you sure it's not a coyote?" And he said, after like a brief sarcastic pause, he goes, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure the buffalo I'm looking at is not a coyote." And so I sent the police out there. It absolutely was a buffalo.
Good grief, where
Somebody
was he
had
living?
somebody had a wild animal sanctuary and this
Ah,
buffalo had gotten out. And the funniest part of it to me is this guy probably tells this story as much as I do. And he's like, and then this idiot asked
ask
me
me
if it's
if
a
it was a
coyote.
coyote. Oh my god, I can't even imagine.
I could
But I
still
mean,
hear the tone in his voice. I mean, it was hysterical.
it sounds like it was the best part. Not even the buffalo.
Mhm.
Just
Oh,
just his
yes.
just his response to the whole situation.
Right, like, this lady's in charge of stuff?
Yeah,
She shouldn't
that's
be answering these.
but you know what though? I mean, he's gotta look back today and think to
Mhm.
himself, "You know what? That is a pretty wild call to make." I
Yeah.
think I probably would have second guessed myself as well,
Mhm.
because it come on, a buffalo?
Yeah, and they ended up chasing this not chasing it, they basically just followed it around for a couple of hours until they could finally get a hold of the owner. Because I mean, it's a buffalo, what can you do? It's bigger than any vehicle we have.
Yeah, I just seen a video the other day of a grandpa saving his son and got thrown like 8 feet into
I
the
saw
air.
that, and that yeah, that same animal is the
Yeah.
one that was walking around on a suburban street.
I think I'd probably have to call 911 too. I don't
I
know
would hope.
though. Maybe animal services, but like you said, people's first go-to is 911.
And in Illinois, at least, it should be. Because in DuPage County, I know we don't have a non-emergency police line.
Mm,
You know, like Chicago has 311 for
right.
non-emergencies. The suburbs don't have that. So for our agency, at least, everything is 911. And even if you call their police desk because you don't think it's 911, they're going to transfer you to 911.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, keep it simple. Try to get
I
everybody to where
agree.
they need to get to as quickly as possible and find resolution regardless of the nature and the severity of the situation.
And I think the less time somebody's transferred, the better. So
Yeah.
if they call the desk and they transfer to us, I would rather have it that way. And then I can ask what I want to ask.
Yeah, and I think about it being on the other end of that too. You're reaching out to try to fix a situation or, regardless if it's emergent or not.
Hmm.
And, if there's a process there, I mean, I hate, having to mash two on the phone for English.
Yes.
I mean, much less having to go through, two or three transfers to get
Right.
to the right person to come out to me,
Yeah. And then by the time you get to me, you're at a 10 because you've been transferred two or three times.
Right. I'm sure that's fun to deal with.
Oh, so fun.
So I'm so glad that your answer to that question was a positive and a funny one in nature. I and it's completely up to you, how you want to answer. If you want to answer, you can just tell me, oh no, that's something that I kind of keep to myself. But the follow-up question usually is do dispatchers experience trauma the same way that the police officers and the firefighters do, considering they're there live having to deal with it? But on the other hand, when you think about what you're dealing with and the individual or the situation, the mind races. And I think you probably have to disconnect yourself from thinking too far into what's going on that you can't see, that you have no control over.
Hmm.
But how does that affect you emotionally? At the end of the day, you've taken all the calls and you're going home.
Well, first off, I can't speak to the trauma that the police or fire, what they go through.
Right.
I don't know. So I'm not going to say it's the same. I can't imagine that it is because I don't see it. But I do know that one thing that we have that they don't is we don't get closure.
Hmm.
So if I take a call for, someone is in cardiac arrest, I don't find out if they live or died typically. An armed robbery, something like that, like we don't we don't usually find out how they end. So that can be hard in its own right because I might answer a call and give CPR, hang up and answer a call and give CPR again to somebody totally different because you're expected to just keep working. So if I take a call for a missing child or some sort of violent domestic abuse, When I'm done with that call and I hang up, I'm expected to answer the next call that comes to me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it just goes to show it takes a certain kind of person, a special type of person to work this job. I don't think everybody could actually just walk into a 911 call center and just go to work and
I
not be
agree.
affected, right? And I don't think it's for everybody. I think there are people, and you've probably seen it in your career, where some folks just couldn't take it anymore
Yes.
and they had to leave.
Yeah. And I mean, after 25 years, I was getting to that point. And I know that some of my friends who have retired from there, they were the same way. The last couple of years and just everything has changed so much since from when we started back in the 90s, and it was wearing on me. Like, I don't know that I could have finished out a 30-year career there. I ended up going out on disability,
Right.
but I don't know that I could have continued doing that a whole lot longer.
That's kind of the opposite of what I was thinking, because I would think that somebody that was in this career would, if there was any stoppage that was going to happen, it would happen earlier on. Like
Hmm.
you would say, no, man, this I can't. I just can't continue to do this, more so than on the back end.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering, like, how different was it going into it in the beginning versus later on? Like, what has changed to the point where you just get to, that's your threshold, and I've reached my limit, as opposed to like saying that I can't do this early on.
I honestly feel like everything has changed. I think, for one, the kids now, the 20 somethings that are coming in, they were raised different than we were, for one.
Mm,
When I started at 911, people didn't even learn your name until you were there for a few months, because people were coming and going so quickly.
sure.
you
Yeah.
know they called me trainee until I was certified, which was like a year. But everybody did it. Nobody was offended by
Right.
that. And that's not the case now. And I think that that might be a little bit of a problem too, because if I don't have a tough skin on the phone, how are you going to handle these phone calls? People would cuss me out all the live long day
Yeah.
on the phone.
Oh
If
yeah.
you don't have a tough skin, how are you going to do that?
I think it would be impossible. I bet you the turnover is probably quite higher in the beginning now than it was back when you started.
I think it's about the same. I really
Really?
do. Which is high. There's a high rate of turnover. And it's not just at my agency, it's everywhere. There's just a high rate of turnover, typically with the new people, because, like you say, a lot of people, they do it for a couple of months and they're like, this is not for me. And that's fine. That's how you know that it's not for you. You tried. And I loved it right away. Like, I love the adrenaline of it. I loved that it was different all the time. I loved most of the people that I worked with, but the callers also have changed over the years,
Mm,
and people are way more entitled now than they were, and they're way more open to share hate than they used to be,
mm.
and violence. And that is what was really starting to wear on me.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely understand how that would be, more prevalent today than ever. We've seen it. I mean, we've grown up around it. We're at this point, and that point in our lives where we're at that age where I'd always think about this too. I'm like, my grandparents and my parents used to say the same thing, when we were growing up and we were younger, about people that were, the age that we're talking about folks right now. And I
Mhm.
just wonder if it's just that cycle or if it's just getting worse, right? So,
I don't
but
know.
yeah, I mean, that's a that's probably a hard pill to swallow. Somebody would say, "Hey, you know what? This just isn't for me anymore. It's not giving me the job satisfaction that I was hoping for."
Mhm.
things change over time. So, you mentioned the people that you worked with. Now, I know that you talk to police officers almost every single day, firefighters and paramedics as well, right?
For some dispatchers, for me personally, I was only a police dispatcher, so very rarely did I talk with fire or paramedics. Every once in a while, I might answer a phone for someone who's a fire dispatcher because they're busy, but it was not the norm for me. But police, yeah, all day, every day.
So they've got like different divisions within your department that handle EMS versus firefighting versus police officers. Obviously, you were dealing with police actions and all that stuff, but you said something about sometimes you could have the opportunity to take over a call for maybe dispatching firefighting or EMS.
Well, when the 911 calls are coming into the center that I worked at, they just come into whoever's phone hasn't rung in the longest time. So that's how the calls come in. So just because I'm a police dispatcher, I absolutely took calls for police, fire, and EMS. And then I would take the information, pass it along to whoever was going to dispatch the fire or EMS, and that was the end of it. But they also could answer police calls. So the phone calls are answered by everyone in the room, but you can tell like if someone's getting busy because not we don't only answer 911 calls. We have 107-digit non-emergency numbers that we had to answer, and maybe also incoming 100 emergency but 7-digit emergency lines. So if you're in Texas and you need to get a hold of DuPage County, there's a 7-digit number you can call, because if you are in Texas and you dial 911, you get Texas 911, and that's not super helpful
Right.
to
Yeah.
you. And we would get those too. They just call 911 because they don't know what to do. And usually it's easy as me Googling, Austin, Texas police. Yeah. And transferring them. But so we have to answer those calls as well. And then you're also getting calls from tow truck agencies and taxi agencies that have received calls, and they think, oh, well, I'll just call 911. They'll know.
That is so not only are you 911, but at times you're also 411.
Oh, absolutely. Google was the greatest thing to happen to 911.
Oh, you could
Loved Google.
definitely tell there was a decrease in those types of calls with the inception of like Google and the internet.
Well, the stuff that I'm able to find for people,
Mm.
because before, if you called me from Austin, Texas, if I didn't have a phone book for Austin, Texas, I'd have dialed 0 for the operator.
So if I have an 847 area code and I'm down in Texas and I dial 911, is it going to give me emergency services in Illinois?
No, like if you called from your cell phone,
Right.
no, it'll take you to whatever tower that phone call hits off of.
Okay.
Now, sometimes they do go rogue and somebody calls from a cell phone and it bounces off a tower nowhere near them.
Mm.
But that's also why it's so important to tell me where you are and give me your phone number. Because then I know, well, you're in Texas. I can't help you.
I can't send you anybody, but I can definitely find out how to get someone to you that's
Exactly.
local.
Yeah.
Let me Google
Yeah.
that. I don't have time for Google.
Google was the best.
Can you imagine back in the day when you had to browse a yellow or a telephone book, right? A yellow pages in
Yeah.
order to find your local emergency response
Mhm.
center, and there was no 911 because even when 911 came about, they tell you that it's for emergencies only, right? And so now as just a civilian trying to figure out, hey, does this constitute calling 911, right? And you're losing crucial seconds in order to get someone to you, and you're like, well, I'm not going to go through and look through the yellow pages. I'm just going to call 911. Forget about it, right?
And honestly, I would rather you just do that,
Yeah,
instead of
because you could
wasting
get them to
time.
the right place
Yep.
when the time comes, of course.
Yeah. So I would rather, I don't know what to do, so I called 911. Perfect. We'll figure it out.
Did so the officers that you interacted with, I imagine that you grew to know them over time, right?
I did. But the funny thing is that most of them, if I sat next to them on a bus, I would never have known. But if they said something, I'd be like, "Oh, hey, I know that voice."
Oh, that's yeah, that's great. I mean, you live your whole life in your ears, at work at least, right?
Yeah.
So I can't imagine what is it like to come home after a long day. And by the way, how long are those shifts?
8 to 12 hours. You always start with an 8-hour day, but because of the high rate of turnover, there was a lot of 12-hour days. And towards maybe after Corona and on, it was devastating, the overtime. I mean, it was great for my wallet,
Right?
but I mean,
Not good for
physically,
up here though, you
yeah,
know.
and even physically, it's just it's devastating because you're seated, you're plugged into a computer for 12 hours, and you get out for a 5-minute break. And then, if you have to use the bathroom, someone will let you out. You get a half-hour lunch and then one more 5-minute break.
It almost sounds like prison.
It was a lot because you're tied to this council. So towards the end of my tenure there, when most of my fellow operators are closest to my age, everybody's, creaky and stiff. So you would just see a bunch of dispatchers pacing back and forth in front of their console because you
Trying to
gotta
keep the
move
blood
some.
flowing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh my
They did
lord.
though, when we got our new building, they got us the hydraulic desks that raise and lower,
I
and
love
those
those.
were amazing.
It's like, oh, my sciatica. I gotta get up and walk around a while.
Yes. Yeah, or you could stand for an hour and work. It was those are genius.
How did you take time for yourself, once you left work and you came home? Because you're not only are you're dealing with all of these things, right? You're coming home and you've got a family, you've got the twins, you've got the husband, and you've got this other life that you have to be a part of when you get home. How much did you have to leave at work? Or I guess the real question is, how much did you end up bringing home, if anything?
I didn't really have a problem not bringing stuff home. It was very easy to just leave stuff at work. I mean, I'm sure somebody could crawl around in here and find reasons why that's not true, but it felt like I was able to leave it at work. But I do notice that I was definitely, I don't know if I was stricter with my kids, but they're like, "Mom, that's never going to happen," when I would tell them what I'm worried about. And I'm like,
Mm.
"You have the misfortune of mom answering 911 calls." So I'm always going to think the worst all the time when it comes to my kids. And they're like, "Oh my God, mom, it's fine." I think that would probably be the biggest thing is how it dictated how I parented.
Yeah, I can see that because, like they're saying to you, "Hey, there's no way that that's going to happen to us," and most people think that way too.
Exactly.
But somebody who's in your position and you're in that role and you're talking to these people and these scenarios are actually happening, they're happening because you're experiencing them with these people.
Mhm.
And then you hear a comment like that and you're like, you have no idea how often that happens for real.
That's exactly it.
We're
And
able to teach the boys quite a bit from that,
I
just
think so.
from that experience. Yeah.
And then also there was, I don't know, a couple of years in the 2010s maybe where our county had a real like epidemic of opioid overdoses. And I would come home all the time and give the kids a talk about drugs and how you have to be so careful. Things might sound exciting to want to try, but 4 people today just in my personal life died of this.
Right. Yeah.
Like this is happening. I know you don't want to think it happens, and I know you're thinking that mom's being over dramatic, but I'm not.
So you think instances like that make the job difficult? Would you consider that kind of the hardest part of the job when you are involved in a call where it doesn't turn out that great?
Honestly, no. And I know it makes me sound cold,
Not at all. I mean,
but I mean
everybody's got
you
an experience, right?
And but I think that's probably the case with a lot of people who have done this for decades. You know, calls are going to end bad, and that's just part of it. And I don't feel like that affected me all that much. I hated it. And honestly, I would pray for people that I was on the phone with or people that were going out to help. But I really don't think that that affected me that much because you can't let it. You can't. You will never make it 25 years if these calls bothered you. Now some get in there. You can't help that. But it was not the norm. I really feel like the majority of calls are you just got to make them voices on a phone.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think it's about being cold. I think it's just being aware of the fact you have to compartmentalize the things
Yeah,
that you are doing that could affect you long term and could spill over into your personal life.
absolutely. And I did see that happen with people.
Absolutely. So we've already talked about one of the funniest moments as far as calls go, and we're talking about what determines a positive or a negative outcome. But the one thing that I think a lot of people wonder, because maybe we see it on TV and it's just so outlandish, but have you ever been in a call where you help deliver a baby?
Me personally, no. I've come so close, and then the paramedics get there, and I'm like, "Ah, I almost had it." But so many of my friends have been able to do that, and I it's awesome.
Yeah,
And then
it's
when you
gotta be pretty rewarding to be able to talk somebody through, and I mean, you mentioned talking people through CPR, I mean, it's a medical procedure. It's not like delivering a baby, and I'm sure
mhm.
as a maternal, the instinct that you have, getting one of those calls, adrenaline, boom, through the roof, and you just wanna be that person to be able to put the cape on for the day, right?
Oh, absolutely, and it feels good when you're able to, like, really help. That's the best, that's why you do it, and we always hear the operator's side of the call, because 'cause we're all in the same room, so I can hear everything that my partner is saying to who they're on the phone with. I don't hear the phone caller's side of it, but you can tell, "Oh, they're delivering her baby," my friend next to me, and when the baby gets delivered, literally everyone in the room cheers. It's very exciting.
That's great, because that's one of those things it's it creates this aura for some reason. Babies will do that in and out of it doesn't even matter, right? I know my when Christian was born, it was my first experience in the labor and delivery room, and when it was over, I was so overwhelmed and so happy, and it was such an amazing feat of human nature. I went outside and bawled, and I can't even imagine the elation that somebody feels when they bring a situation that they're dealing with at the call center to a successful conclusion.
Mhm.
And I imagine that it's kind of tough because in the aggregate, when you're talking about all the things you deal with, just even in a day, how do you define what a successful shift is?
Everybody went home safe.
Yeah, yeah,
That it's really as simple as that. I just want everybody we dispatch for to go home safe. Because I know I'm going home safe.
right.
Nobody's getting into the dispatch center, it's like Fort Knox. But that's what it all comes down to is just making sure everybody gets home safe.
Well, I mean, I think that's the goal everywhere you go. Like for me, and you know, I relate to what you and I do kind of similarly in a way that you're talking to somebody that you'll never get to see,
Mhm.
that you are helping them through a situation. And in my service, what we did, what our mission was to give information to the people on the ground to keep them safe, and kind of in the same idea, right? In the same
Thank
respect,
you.
we want to make sure that we want to get everybody home with all 10 fingers and toes
Mhm.
and, back to their families. And that was the mission. And so, like, just like you said, mission success if you're able to walk out at the end of the day and know
Mhm.
that you brought everybody back home safely.
Yeah. But then there's the, armed robberies or the violent calls where, I don't know, the bad guy is caught, you know, that's
Right. Yep.
always pretty sweet when, you've just got somebody out there who's just they're a jerk and they're violent or whatever. It's really nice when you're able to help the officers catch them.
Yeah, that's definitely good. I mean, talk about job satisfaction. It's like, you don't have to put a badge on,
Mhm.
but you're a part of a bigger team that nobody gets to see that makes stuff like that happen in real life. So those 25, you said 25, right?
Mhm.
Those 25 years you should be immensely proud of.
Thank you. I am.
So one last thing, and then we're going to go into like a little rapid fire segment that I've got. But have you ever Have you ever received a thank you like after the fact? It's not like, "Oh, thank you," and then they hang up because usually you're not able to talk to somebody like that. But has anybody ever tracked you down or maybe
Me
heard your voice
personally,
and
no,
recognized it? No?
but
But it's happened?
it has happened. Yeah, where people have contacted the dispatch agency, our dispatch agency, to track somebody down to thank them. And I think that's awesome, because that means that person really helped them. Like one of my girlfriends talked somebody through using an AED machine, and it was a scary situation because they were on water and they were wet. So she
Ooh,
was able to keep everybody safe, also use the AED, and that person was saved, and that person's family contacted to get a hold of my girlfriend.
yeah. That's amazing, and that's gotta be a great feeling because, those calls are long forgotten, or at least you hope, right?
Yeah.
And not in a bad way, but it just is like, "Hey, I've gotta move on to the next thing,"
Hmm.
and then, a week, a month may go by and something like that happens. It really brings it all together, and I
Hmm.
think that there should be more of that in the world, not just for that particular instance, but for a lot of how we do and how we carry ourselves and we interact with each other these days. There's just not enough of that.
I agree. Even if, a delivery man goes above and beyond to get your refrigerator in or something, I'm sure he would love for his boss to know that. And it would take you 5 minutes to make
Absolutely.
a phone call.
Can we give Google like 5-star reviews on GCOM?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. I did say I was going to touch momentarily on the evolving of the technology, only because I put it in the history segment. So there was two things that came along, and that was the E911.
Mhm.
And so I think that's where you were at. I think did you
Yes.
get when you first started? It was E911, right?
No, E911 didn't come in until after, at least at our agency. Because if I'm thinking of the right thing, it's the enhanced 911.
Correct.
So when someone dials 911 ahead of time, you can go to a website and you can enter information like, this is a blue house. It's hard to find, or they got a dog who looks mean but isn't, stuff like that.
So
If
add
somebody
notes.
has and you add them yourself so that when I take the 911 call, I could say, okay, this person has a severe peanut allergy, or they keep guns in the house for some reason.
So
So
who's
you
doing
enter
that?
it.
The callers putting that
Yes.
information in?
And you do it ahead of time. Like right now, you could go to E911 and you can enter this information. I have it on mine. When I was my grandma's caretaker, I was on hers. I love E911.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. Because I think your E911 sounds more geared for the caller. It definitely helps the operator out more, right? But I don't think it helps the operator out as much as the computer aided dispatch, right? Did you work with CAD?
Yes.
And how
And
was that?
awesome. I hated when we didn't have CAD. Or it would crash once in a while, or if you're getting a new system, it's going to be down for a while. And that's when I was saying that they would do everything on the dispatch note cards.
Mhm.
That was prior to CAD. Everything was just pen and paper and the radio. So when we got CAD, again, that's all I ever worked on. It's awesome. I mean, because we had so many cities that we dispatched for, there's no way I was going to know what officer worked what beat in what town
Right.
for every town because we had 30 some towns. You just, now there are people that I worked with who did know that and they were amazing. That's just not how my brain works. I needed CAD and I loved it.
Yeah, from what I could tell, CAD was, I mean, just the resources that you had at your fingertips to
Hmm.
be able to understand, where, like, say, like a patrol unit, where it was located at any particular time, so you could dispatch the correct one because it was relative to the location that it needed to be
Absolutely
at.
right.
And then not only that, but you track it from the moment you dispatch it to the moment it arrives on scene, and you can talk them through it, and you go back and forth between, I guess, a caller and the officers that you're dispatching to give them a heads up to let them know, hey, this is what you can expect when you show up, and then switch back and tell the caller, hey, I see their ETAs in about 3 minutes. Be patient, be calm. We'll get there as soon as we can. They're on the way, type of thing, right?
Well, we didn't have, like, I was not able to track in real time where my officer was. Now I could, in the later years of CAD, I was able to track that they were at a certain intersection. But that's as far as it got when I was there. Like we
Mm,
weren't tracking in real time. I'm sure that there are programs where you can do that. Just isn't what we had.
right. Oh yeah, it's probably come a long way, and as fast as technology evolves, and the further along it gets, the faster it evolves. So, I mean, in the last like 3 or 4 years, because how long have you been out?
4 years,
Yeah, so I
four,
bet
five
you
years.
even in 4 years, it's probably gotten even better.
I'm sure it has. And I know that my agency even got another new CAD system, which honestly, I'm glad I didn't see. I don't like change.
Right? Sometimes
I want to know
there's
what I know.
there's only so much change you can take, and if you want to
Yes.
give me change, just give it to me in small doses, because it'd be like drinking from a fire hose. Let's do some rapid fire
Okay.
questions. So, coffee or energy drinks?
Coffee.
Of
If you
course,
cut me, I bleed coffee.
I should know that, but hey, people who are watching, they don't know that.
That's true.
Day shift or night shift?
Night shift.
Really? Why?
Yep. I don't, for one, I'm not a morning person.
Hmm.
And on my preferred shift was 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. or 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. That was always my preferred shift. It was the busiest, and I personally liked to be busy.
Makes the day go by faster, right?
It does. And I prefer to be busy. I want to answer all the calls. I want to, yeah, I like to be busy. So afternoon shift, definitely.
Got it. And then, well, I'd ask you police, fire, EMS, dispatch, but we know which one.
Yep.
It's police.
A lot of people wanted to learn all three. I did not, but
Yeah, I mean, why? Why are you going to
and
make
I
me?
think I was pretty good on police. You know, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think I was pretty good on police. And if I learned anything else, I thought I'm going to just be okay then at both, and I didn't want that.
No, no, no. I think it's important. If you focus all your energy on one thing, you can become the best that
Yeah,
you're going to be at it, as opposed to being mediocre across the board. Nobody
yeah.
wants that. All right. So headset on one ear, or was it both ears?
It was one ear because you can only have one ear covered because the other ear has to be open to hear your radio traffic.
Oh,
If I'm on the phone call is what's playing in my ear. So
okay.
then I need to have the other ear open for the officers calling to me for radio stuff. But if I'm not on the phone, then the radio will come through my headset.
So there's no switching back and forth on the same headset then.
Not if I'm on the phone. If I'm on the phone, that's what I'm hearing.
Okay. Got it. What's the first thing you did after a stressful shift? Like, it was like your go-tos. Like, I had a bad day. Most people go to the bar. Other people might, who knows? But what did you do?
Loud music.
Loud music. I
Yep.
love it.
And I'm a
Yes.
heavy metal fan, so
So you were thrashing the
Yep,
whole way home,
I absolutely was
which
thrashing the
is the
whole way home.
complete and total opposite of what I think a dispatcher would do with nothing but noise in their head all shift long. I'd be driving home in silence.
I don't well, it took me years. Now I've been gone there for like we said, I think 4 years,
Mhm.
but for the first couple, like, it was very unnerving not having 1,000 things going at once. So the last thing I wanted at the end of a hard day was silence.
Mm. Yeah, I guess gradual introduction of silence
Yes.
at the end of the day as opposed to just straight nothing, right?
Yeah,
I think that would take you to a different level because I think it probably puts you in your head, I think. If it was
absolutely.
dead silent, I mean, all you got is the memories of the day. So they're just rotating all the calls. So basically that was your way to purge the day.
That's a really good way of thinking
Metal it
about it.
out.
I
Yep.
didn't wanna be in my head, and if Dave Mustaine is in it, then I'm not.
I love it. We rocking Megadeth the whole way home.
Mhm.
What's the most rewarding part of the job?
Really helping people. And I know it sounds corny, but I just truly love helping people,
Even if you didn't get to see the final result. You
and
know
we
you
almost
knew it
never
was
did.
happening.
But
Yeah?
I know that I helped.
And I'm sure you did. There's probably thousands, just think about it, thousands of people who have benefited from that phone call to you. So think about that for a second.
Right? I love that.
And then one last one. What one word that describes dispatch?
That's a hard one. Hard.
Hard, yeah,
Mhm.
I'd say that. Chaotic.
Oh,
I
chaotic. Yeah, that's a
I don't
good
know, but
one.
it's crazy though because if you think about it, the organization and how structured that call center probably is, but what's going on in those headphones and on the radios and out at the scene is probably the most craziest thing in the world. But somebody who had never been in there would walk in and probably wouldn't see that right off the bat. They just see a bunch of people milling around doing their job, talking, right?
Yeah, for the most part. But I mean, there was always a low hum in the room. I think people would be surprised how many people are in the room, for an agency our size. And that it gets really loud in there because even if you're all just talking normally, that's still 20 some people all talking at one time. It's a very big room, so it could be echoey.
Mm,
And people they would also be surprised that, if I'm on one side of the room, someone on the other side of the room who might be 60 feet away hears what I'm saying. And they're like, oh, wait, what does she have over there? Because we're used to like picking up keywords. You don't mean to listen for them,
right.
but when you hear somebody say, oh, wait, he had a gun. What now? Everybody hears that.
So what do you do when that happens? I mean, is that a distraction or are you trying to level some help out that way because you heard
That's
something that maybe it's
exactly
going to
it.
help? Okay.
Yes. Or do I need to give that information to the city that I'm working?
Makes sense.
So if a
Absolutely.
bordering town, if I hear their operator say something like that, automatically I want to know so that I can give that to my officers so that they know it's happening. Most of the time they want to help, but at the very least they want to know so that if something comes into their town, they know what's happening.
So there's overlap there,
A
and
ton.
yeah, and I mean, it has to be. I was looking at the history of DUCOM, and I was surprised. First off, I was surprised of how DUCOM came to be. I could go
Mhm.
to the about page and understand that that police officer got kidnapped after that armed robbery, the bank robbery, right?
And
And
in
then
Franklin Park, I think.
yeah, and then subsequently, they took his life, and that's why they started that. What a worthy cause. It's unfortunate that it takes tragedy like that to happen, to enact change. But sometimes, those people will remain heroes, right?
Mhm.
And because of the role that they played in making this wonderful thing come to life, which is the DUCOM call center.
I was
So
proud to work there.
yeah, and I mean, You should be. I can't tell you enough. So we were both in service, just different uniforms. And there are some things that I think
I
that
don't consider us the same at all.
I know, but there's certain things that we deal with in our jobs, and I don't want to take away from anybody else's job too, because I think that we all it impacts us in one way or the other. But these jobs in particular, probably more so. And I know we kind of touched on it, but did your family understand what your job was really like? Did they ever, you ever sit down with them and talk to them about it, or you just kind of went about your day and came home and kind of brushed it off and went about your home business?
I think they understood. I don't know if the kids really did, but as far as like our extended family, I think they got it. I missed most holidays, at least my first several years at Ducom.
Family events and
Hmm. All that
stuff like
stuff.
that. Yeah, see, so yes, when I say that in or out of uniform, regardless of what your role is specifically, and that's why I focus so much on first responders, is because people don't understand the sacrifices that you folks make. And I think that when people think sacrifice and missing family events and holidays and all that, your brain first wants to go to folks who are forward deployed. And that's not always like that. There's jobs all over the place that people have to deal with, missing time away from family.
Absolutely.
And
Grocery stores, fast food.
yeah, yeah. So I think it's important that we highlight that. And I definitely know that you and I miss a lot of family events and a lot of holidays. But hey,
Hmm.
we're getting all those back now, right?
Yep. I don't miss anything now.
No.
I
And
don't care
that's
how
a
minor it
good
is. I'm
thing.
coming with.
So I guess if I said, would you do it again? Your answer would probably be no.
Oh, I absolutely would do it again.
Oh, good for you.
I loved it.
Well, before we wrap up, what's one thing you wish every person listening understood about dispatchers?
We're not the ones who are responding to your call. And the questions we ask, we really do need to know. We're not giving you a hard time. We're not trying to pry into your personal business. We have to know this stuff for everybody's safety who's responding and their safety.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're trying to save a life or just make their day better than what it was before they picked up the phone.
Right. Or certain cities have certain policies that we don't make, but I have to adhere to those city policies. Some cities don't do lockout to vehicles. Some cities don't do private property accidents.
Hmm.
It's not my rule, it's their rule that I have to make sure that we all follow.
So basically, try to make a dispatcher's job easier in order to be able to help you the right way.
Help me help you.
Exactly. All right. So we'll end here and we'll close with this. I've spent 24 years in uniform. And one thing I've learned is that every mission has people most of us never see. Dispatchers are one of those professions. They don't arrive with lights and sirens. Most people never meet them, but they are often the first person helping on someone's worst day. And after hearing this conversation, I hope you'll never think of the person who answered the phone the same way again, because that voice is going to be the difference between a good day and a bad day. Thanks for listening. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode brought back memories, taught you something new, or reminded you of someone who served, I'd appreciate it if you share it with them. If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, leave a comment, and let me know what part of today's story resonated with you. I read every comment, and many of them inspire future episodes. You can also find me at notabystander.com, where every purchase helps support the first responder community and the missions behind the podcast. Until next time, I'm Chris Garcia. Take care of each other, never stop serving those around you, and remember, be all in, always.